Hello, and welcome back to a special edition of This Film Is Lit, the podcast where we usually talk about movies that are based on books. This week, though, it's not a normal episode. Like we said in our last week's episode, we're taking a break, a little week off for the whole holidays thing, and then it also aligned our schedule up with some stuff. But we have a very special episode for you this week. We've done a review. We didn't do Force Awakens, but we reviewed Last Jedi when it came out, because we weren't doing the podcast when Force Awakens came out. We reviewed Last Jedi 2 years ago when that came out, and we just saw The Rise of Skywalker for the second time. Mm-hmm. We have some notes, we have some feelings, and we're going to talk about them. So this is a Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker special episode review. Normally, our movie reviews and TV reviews and that sort of thing will be on our Patreon feed. We want to remind you, if you enjoy hearing us talk about current things without, the normal format of a normal This Film Is Lit episode, if you support us on Patreon, you will get access to a lot more of that. We will soon be recording our thoughts on the full season of The Mandalorian and the first season of The Witcher, which we literally just finished moments ago as we're recording this. So if you want to hear our thoughts on those things, head on over to patreon.com for $5 a month. If you support us, you'll get access to the bonus podcast feed that has all of those discussions. But this today, right now, we're just talking about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
We're going to start spoiler-free. We're going to get into spoilers at length. We'll warn you before we get there, but we're going to do a little brief beginning part here that will be completely spoiler-free. So if you haven't seen the film yet and you're deciding if you want to or not, again, most people probably have, but this one I know people were a little more kind of, because the critic reviews have not been stellar, and some of the reaction online has been very mixed, shall we say, that I'm sure some people were kind of just trying to decide whether or not to go see it. I will say this, my sort of baseline is that I went into this movie, or my sort of first take is that I went in this movie expecting to very much hate it. Like, completely, based on things I had seen said, based on what I felt about The Last Jedi, which, if you haven't listened to our review on that, I'm one of those rare people that really liked The Last Jedi. I didn't love it completely, but I liked it quite a bit. It's a different type of movie than what I was expecting, but I ended up enjoying it, and I think it does a lot of things that are really interesting and does them really well. You didn't like it quite as much as me at the time. I know you still like it.
Yeah, I
overall.
thought it was fine.
I think it does a lot of really interesting things, and I thought it was a really good character piece. And there's a lot to argue about whether or not, a lot of people didn't feel that way, but I did. And so I was worried because the rumor was that this movie was going to change a lot about what happened, sort of kind of go back on a lot of what happened in The Last Jedi. We'll get to whether or not that did or didn't happen in the spoiler part. But so I went in with very low expectations, expecting to hate it. I didn't hate it, but it's also not a particularly good movie.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
It had a lot of things that I didn't love. It had some things that I also really enjoyed and really liked. I think it's fun at times if you're willing to look past, and not saying you have to or that you should look past the flaws in the film, but I think if you're able to sort of look past the problems in it and kind of try to ignore that, there's fun to be had in this movie. When we went and saw it with my family, they all enjoyed it quite thoroughly. Yeah. And I think if you're not super analyzing, not even analyzing, if you're just going to watch a fun Star Wars flick that'll kind of make you feel okay and feel good, and if you don't think about it super duper hard, just like kind of first impressions, I can understand. I think it's a fine little ride, but it's also not a good movie, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. It's fun, but it's got issues.
It's got issues, and it can also be very not fun depending on. I think part of the reason I found it fun and don't have the sort of outrage that a lot of the outrage, not outrage, a lot of the anger and sort of disappointment that I was seeing online was from people who really liked The Last Jedi. And on top of that, just who like Star Wars in general, were very disappointed with it. And a lot of them were sort of like more, I follow a lot of like lefty critics, like media critics and that sort of thing. A lot of them seemed to really not like it.
Yeah.
And so I was prepped for that. And I think maybe I was also just a little worn out on just the whole thing, to where when it didn't completely like do every worst thing that I was expecting, I was like, okay, I think is what happened.
Yeah.
It didn't do every terrible thing that I was expecting as terribly. Again, it's sort of damning by faint praise, but like overall, it's like, to me, it's like a C- movie. Like, it's not in terms of like, if I had to give it a grade, not that that's not a good grade, but it's also not, I wouldn't give it an F.
Great grade, but I think a C- is fair. As someone who has been a teacher. I think the low end of average, hedging on needs improvement, is fair.
Yeah. All right, let's stop beating around and sort of talking more vaguely and just get into some of the things that I thought did and didn't work. This is still non-spoiler, but this is some of the things that I thought worked really well in the movie and some of the things that didn't. We're definitely going to get into more of the... Most of these things are positives because most of the things that are negatives really require spoilers to discuss.
Yes.
I think at any length.
Yes.
So if you want to see what we didn't like about the movie, you're going to have to wait and get to the spoiler part here. This first part won't take too long, but just kind of briefly, what I kind of liked, the things I thought worked about the movie. One was the performances. I thought everybody, and of course, I mean, none of these three have ever had bad performances, I don't think, arguably.
No, I don't think so.
Like, if you're comparing that to like the prequel trilogy where like Hayden Christensen's performance is not good. What's her name?
Natalie Portman?
Natalie Portman's performance is not particularly good. At times it's okay, at times. And a lot of that, again, is the writing and other stuff. But just nobody in this, everybody feels like they're doing a really good job. I thought Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are both great in this one. They're kind of like pivotal to be good. Everybody does fine. Like, everybody's good. And beyond fine. I think Adam Driver specifically and Daisy Ridley both do a really good job. And that, I think, helps elevate certain moments in the film beyond what they're actually doing. Like, beyond what is on the page in terms of, like, how it's affecting me emotionally. And I think that's the second thing, is I think the emotional impact of a lot of the scenes worked for me, at least overall. I think this movie works on an emotional level if you don't think about it. Like, if you just sort of watch it and then certain scenes happen and if you're not super like trying to deconstruct what's going on in the scene, it works emotionally on you. At least it did for me. Numerous times throughout this movie, I felt that tightness in my chest. And I think that's mainly from two things. One, the performance, but also because we're already emotionally attached to these characters over the course of the first two movies.
I think that is something that's really key. I don't think that this movie would work if it was all brand new characters that we didn't know.
It wouldn't work at all if these were new characters that we didn't know, or if the first two movies, and I think that's even a benefit. I think if you go back, if you watch this movie and you get those feelings in your chest and you like this movie but you didn't like The Last Jedi, I think you need to reevaluate what The Last Jedi was doing in terms of characters, because I think obviously about half of the character development was done in The Last Jedi to get you to the point in this movie to where you care about these characters, and when certain things happen you get emotional about it, or you feel happy or sad or whatever. A lot of that had to do with The Last Jedi. And so it was interesting to me that I think that even people who didn't like The Last Jedi would watch this movie and have to kind of at least appreciate the fact that some of their emotions in this movie are tied to what happened in The Last Jedi, which I thought was interesting. And it's sort of interesting, not dichotomy is the right word, but also the other thing that makes those emotional scenes land the way that they do is the score.
Oh, yeah.
The score is incredible. It's John Williams. It's probably going to be it's definitely going to be his last Star Wars score. Maybe one of his last scores of all time, but it's brilliant. Like, It's a Star Wars movie. The scores are always brilliant. It's always John Williams, and they're always really good. But this one in particular felt like it did a really good job of capturing, especially after seeing it a second time, little tiny details of callbacks to different moments throughout the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
Different little music cues and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they did a really good job of picking up previous pieces of the composition, and especially the character themes, I think.
Yeah, and I also think this movie just leans really heavily on the score. It would be interesting to see and like compare in terms of like big scenes how much the score is prominent in this movie versus other, like the first two. I feel like they use the score a lot more in this movie and sort of take out all the rest of the sound and just give us the score in a way that the first two movies, obviously every Star Wars movie does that at times. It's like kind of a thing, but this one felt like it did it a lot, and it works because the music's really good, but it's also potentially like a little cheap. Like if you're just leaning on that John Williams score, it's like, all right. Speaking of it being fun, the action sequences I thought were all pretty good.
Yeah.
They weren't my favorite lightsaber fights, but there are a fair number of them, so you at least get like a handful of scenes. That was a lot of complaints with The Last Jedi people had, is that there's
not enough lightsabers.
There's like not any lightsaber fights really, arguably, which was very intentional, but I didn't mind it, but I also can appreciate wanting, it's a Star Wars movie, you want a good lightsaber fight, and there were some good ones, nothing amazing. Honestly, I don't think any of them, personally, I didn't find any of them in this movie as well choreographed and cool as like the throne room sequence in The Last Jedi, which isn't a lightsaber fight because they're fighting other people. Yeah. But I thought that one was maybe better choreographed and more interesting than any of the ones in this one, but there's more in this one and they're similar. And we actually get some actual lightsaber on lightsaber fights, which are pretty good, including like one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, which we'll talk about in the spoilers, that I thought was really cool, but we'll get there in a minute. And then the last thing I had for what I thought works was I thought the humor was pretty good. It's a very funny film, but there was only one moment in particular that felt out of place to me, that I felt like it was used poorly. And if I remember, I'll get to that in the spoilers. But other than that, I thought it was very charming and funny in a way that felt appropriate. Yeah, to keep I would agree with that. Yeah, kind of light and fun in an otherwise pretty heavy movie. So I thought they did an okay job with that. But and then there's what doesn't work, and that for me was pretty much everything the script did. Yeah, pretty much. It's the only thing you have listed here, but boy, is it a big thing. I have one note here, but it's literally everything. It's the exposition. It's retooling and sort of retconning what happened in The Last Jedi, which they do to mixed levels of success, I think. Yeah. And then they cram way too much into this movie in terms of like there's a ton of exposition, but nothing is explained enough. Really, like not a lot of stuff isn't like the main. So obviously it's in the trailers. It's not a spoiler. Palpatine's back, and that's like the big thing. He's the big bad, and that is not given nearly enough time to explain to us what's going on there and why. Yeah. Without getting into spoilers, it's explained, but it feels real rushed. Yeah, I think there's a lot that we're expected to swallow, and I don't think that the script does a good enough job of zooming the airplane up to our mouths. Yeah, and the thing is that this movie definitely could have been two movies, and now obviously it couldn't have been two movies because it's like they do trilogies, like they do, they do 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, like they did. That's how it works. So it couldn't have been two movies, but it also needed to be two movies or something. It either needed to be two movies or the bigger critique that everybody has levied, but that I also agree with and have felt even before I saw the movie, is that it's so abundantly clear that they didn't have a plan when they started the sequel trilogy. Yeah, that if they had known this was the end game the whole time, they could have completely changed how they were doing them. Not completely, but tweaked the way the first two movies were set up to where this movie could have been one movie and we could have had a lot of the legwork that we needed to get us to this final, end game in those first two movies, whereas they try to do it in the first two acts of this movie, and it just didn't quite work for me. It just felt like I was missing a lot, and it felt like a lot was shoehorned in, and because of that, it has to be exposited by people standing in circles, which is never great.
Yeah,
you can do it. You get one scene of that maybe in a movie, but this movie does it a couple times in a way that just feels real.
It's not interesting, and it's hard to watch.
It's real hard to watch because this movie, one scene in particular, we'll get to if we remember in the spoilers. It's not really. It's just one scene in particular early in the film. Literally, like the Resistance is standing around in a circle, explaining what's going on to each other in a way that just it's like the lazy. Like, sure, maybe that would happen in real life. Like, people would stand around a circle and talk about what was going on so that everybody was on the same page. But when you watch it in a movie, it just feels like the laziest form of storytelling. And it feels awkward and unnatural. And it reminds me a lot of, like, if you go to see, like, a high school play. Yeah. And they're all clearly, like, standing on stage saying lines at each other. That's what it feels like. There's almost no way to not have it feel like that. That's the thing. And I think the thing that's was the worst about it, and this is my last little note here before we get to spoilers, was about the script, is the moment to moment writing. I think you can have like little lines of dialogue and stuff that just felt off, and that had to be the first pass at that, where I'm like, I shouldn't be rewriting dialogue on the fly in my head because I'm not that good of a writer. But and I don't have super specific examples, but that scene in particular where we're talking about where the Resistance is standing around like under the Falcon or whatever, like explaining what's going on. I was like, every line of dialogue delivered felt like the first pass at that line that each person was saying, because you can do that scene in a way that's really interesting if there's a little more subtlety and nuance to it. And now a lot of people will say that later seasons of Game of Thrones had its own writing problems, and I don't disagree depending on the season and what you're talking about. But that show did a lot of people standing around war tables in rooms discussing things and explaining plot, and it never felt as contrived. Yeah. And on the nose as the scenes in this movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? I know, I agree. Yeah, because you can do it in a way that feels natural. Like, okay, yeah, this is a thing people have to do when they're in a war. They have to sit around and talk about what's going on and explain. You know what I mean? That happens, and we can watch that. But this movie, it literally is like high school level, like, that means this character's doing this? Oh, no, but how? Because this thing we didn't think of. Oh, I didn't think of that either. Like, and it's... And they're delivered almost with that level of like stilted weird. It feels fake, like it's so strange. And that was some of the bigger problems. And again, that's what I'm talking about when I say the moment to moment like writing was just like, that can't be the best that a whole room of writers came up with. Yeah, I mean that's really like the thing that kind of irritates me, is that it's like, is this really the best we could do? Yeah. Come on, guys. It's and that was rough, but we're gonna get to spoilers. Like I said, overall, you already know if you wanted to go see this movie or not. I said it on Twitter after we got out the first time of seeing it. I didn't hate it as much as I expected, which was about as good as I could have hoped for. But I also did hate parts of it and didn't like a lot about it. But it's not the worst thing that it could have been, but it's not super fun. I don't know. I'm very mixed, and I think I just can't muster a lot of like enthusiasm about hating it, because it could have been so much worse, but it's also not good. Yeah, it's a C-. Yeah, it's a C-. It's not worth your energy to hate it. No, but it's also not good. I would desperately have loved to see now what Rian Johnson would have written for now, because like, love or hate Last Jedi, like and a lot of people don't like it and hate it. I think that if we had continued that story and seen where Rian Johnson took that, because there's no arguing that Rian Johnson is not a more talented writer than J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. It's absolutely the case that Rian Johnson is. If just go watch Knives Out. He wrote that movie by himself. Well, he's the only credited writer. Mm-hmm. I'm sure other people were involved. But go watch Knives Out. There's no way that, again, say what you want about the decisions made in The Last Jedi. If we continued those storylines, there's no way that Rian Johnson's Episode 9 wouldn't have been twice the movie that this is. Even if you didn't like where it went, there's no way it wouldn't have been a better movie, I think. But I also don't hate J.J. Abrams. I think he's talented at certain things. I just think that maybe writing isn't one of them. But anyways, I saw a tweet somewhere that it made me chuckle a lot because J.J. Abrams has been writing with Damon Lindelof for a long time. Like they wrote Lost together. Damon Lindelof wrote Prometheus. They worked on the Star Trek movies together, at least the first one. And so they've been like a writing team for a long time. And then all the writing failures in J.J. Abrams' movie, like everybody always liked the direction in like Lost and all that stuff, but the writing at times faltered, and everybody always blamed it on Damon Lindelof. And then now since they've sort of split ways and haven't been working as much together anymore, Damon Lindelof went on to write like The Leftovers and The Watchmen. Which are both like everybody who sees them are like, these are incredible and like amazingly written. And J.J. Abrams has gone on to write like Star Wars movies, and I don't know what else he's been doing, but he's done other stuff. And so I saw a tweet the other day. It's like, so all this years when I've been blaming Damon Lindelof for Lost and Star Trek and whatnot, you tell me it was J.J. Abrams the whole time? Like, was I blaming the wrong person this whole time? Because because Damon Lindelof wrote Prometheus, so you haven't been blaming. It fluctuates. We got the layers. People are multifaceted. Sometimes they do good things, sometimes they do bad things. So
true. Yeah. True.
But anyways, that's it for our non-spoiler discussion. Like I said, you've seen it or you haven't already. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the spoilers of Rise of the Skywalker.
The Force will be with you.
Always.
So this is going to jump around a bit between things. We have some notes and spoilers of things we liked, but it's mostly things we didn't like I mentioned earlier. So we're just going to jump around and talk about them. First off, Rey's a Palpatine. That's the big reveal. Which, okay, I guess. It's one of those things that after episode 7, that's what I wanted. Kind of. I wanted that after episode 7, I wanted that big reveal. Who is Rey? I loved it's the J.J. Abrams, the mystery box. Like, he loves to set up those mysteries and be like, let you think about, ooh, what's this? What's it? And so that was a lot of fun. And if episode 8 came out and that's what it was, I would be like, great. Maybe I would have been. We'll see. Or we won't see, but who knows? But then episode 8 came out and I really liked that Rey was nobody. Well, that was the whole idea, is that she was nobody. And then 9 comes out. It's like, nah, she's Palpatine's granddaughter. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's such an obvious retool of The Last Jedi that there's no way to not make it feel like a retool, because that's what it is.
Oh, it's absolutely. And now you can argue that, and it is fair to say that, like, because we talked about in our review of The Last Jedi whether or not we thought Kylo Ren was telling the truth when he told her, your parents were nobody. This movie he wasn't lying. He just didn't know who her parents actually were. Like, they essentially kind of were nobody to him that he knew of. Like, so this movie posits, 9 posits that that's all he knew about her parents, was that they were nobody. But he just didn't know that they were like Palpatine's son and daughter-in-law or whatever. And so, like, he wasn't lying. He was just uninformed. I think it would have been more interesting if he had been lying, if he knew, which is what we speculated on. Yeah,
that would have been more interesting, and I think that would have been a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Potentially, but depending on where this movie goes, maybe not. But yeah.
Anyways, so I will say this: I saw a defense. So of all the left-leaning movie critics, it's not important. It just happens to be all the movie critics that I enjoy. They usually tend to be left-leaning people on Twitter and whatnot. They all hated this movie. The one person who likes this movie is Movie Bob. And
really?
Yes, he's like he's a polarizing figure among plenty of people, but. I generally tend to like his movie. I think he's pretty good movie reviewer, regardless of anything else you think about him in terms of politics and stuff. In general, I tend to think he has a good critical eye on films, and he actually really liked this movie. And I don't know if he tweeted it or retweeted it. Somebody's defense of making Rey Palpatine, and it's the only good defense I've seen, is that maybe the writers thought that the idea of rejecting the growing up and finding out or being part of like an evil family that wants terrible things for you and doesn't it doesn't want the best for you, and rejecting that in favor of a new in favor of like a found family that you created because they care about you is a more important message than the idea that The Last Jedi posited of she's not anybody, her parents aren't important, don't really matter at all, and she just gets to like I'm doing a bad job paraphrasing the tweet, but basically comparing like the two themes that we had going. In Last Jedi, it was that her parents don't matter,
right?
She's not of a royal bloodline, blah blah blah.
Right,
but she can still do incredible things.
The idea is like anybody can be a hero.
Yes, anybody can be a hero. Comparing that with in this movie that you are of an important bloodline, but those people that are part of that bloodline specifically are evil and bad and want you to do bad things, and you reject that and decide to do good things instead. Saying that maybe that's a more important, salient message. I don't know if I'd agree. I would also say that it's already been done in the original trilogy.
Yes.
So like that's maybe my argument against that argument is that sure, I can see that storyline being important, but also we did that already.
Yeah. Which
obviously why J.J. Abrams did it, because we did that already as like should be the byline on his resume. J.J. Abrams, we did that already, but I'm doing it again. I like J.J. Abrams at times, but it's like, yeah, that's what the original trilogy is about. Like, that's Luke's story. That is literally Luke's story. Well, it's also, he comes from, like, he doesn't know his destiny and wants something greater, but then finds out he's part of this, like, his dad is Darth Vader, and he's, like, has to reject that and go do it. Like, the whole Return of the Jedi is him rejecting becoming part of the evil empire, and then, him doing that leads to his dad.
So we're doing the exact same thing, just worse, because we're crushing it all into one movie.
Yeah, just worse because it's all... Yeah, exactly. And so, but I still thought it was not the worst, like, at least attempt at a defense of making that. Yeah. But it's still... I don't agree with it. I still think I prefer the idea of her not being of some super important bloodline that is going to here to save the galaxy.
Well, and I saw... I want to say it was a piece of like an interview with Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
Talking about how in the original trilogy, I am your father was the hardest thing for Luke to hear.
Yeah.
And with this current trilogy, you're fucking nobody was the hardest thing for Rey to hear.
Yeah.
So, maybe we push the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, and just change it up. Just change it up. And especially because it's then there's also a really important message too, because that's especially, and Rian Johnson's not a whole ton older than us. He's probably in his 40s, I think, or maybe pushing 50. But that idea, that is another, like, you're fucking nobody is definitely a thing that millennials and maybe even Gen Xers, not maybe, for sure, like Gen Xers and millennials and stuff deal a lot with this sort of that search for an identity in a world where it feels like impossible to find. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's definitely a thing that it's why everybody has a podcast.
It's definitely a generational thing that we're grappling with.
Yeah. Yeah. We weren't forced into a world war to like go deal with, and then when we got done, just happy to have kids and not be in war or whatever. Like so that search for an identity is definitely something, and a meaning is definitely something that identify or that resonates with people our age, I would think. Yeah. And I think that's what Rian Johnson was going for. And so I don't love it. I not only don't love it, I liked a lot that Rey that she didn't have the royal blood, the democratizing of the Force, all that sort of stuff. I liked all that, and I didn't love that they sort of dialed that back. Yeah. In this one. Except with like a weird bone throwing to like, oh, Finn also kind of has the Force.
But we're not going to actually acknowledge it.
But only so that he can feel when Rey's upset. Like literally that's all he does with it. It's maybe not all he does with it. There's a couple other moments where he potentially uses it a little bit. But they don't it's just like a very... And now that one it's one of those things that rides the line between like, oh, it's just like a little subtle thing that the movie doesn't explain, but also like maybe just a little bit more for that. Yeah. Like, okay, I got it. Finn kind of has the Force, but it felt like they just didn't do enough with it to really like give it its due. It just felt like this weird, like again, like throwing a bone to like, the idea of like, oh yeah, other people can have the Force, not just the Skywalkers and the Palpatines of the world. I guess Finn can have the Force, kind of, a little bit, like a lesser, like 3/5 of the Force.
Oh my god! Stop it!
God, I'm not. Look, I didn't write this movie. I'm just.
But also. As long as we're still on this topic, there were a lot of lines in this movie that just like gave me cringe. Yeah, and "You're a Palpatine" was one of them.
Yeah, it's again, it's so many lines in this, and maybe it was because they had to rewrite stuff, and the production cycle was potentially rushed because. So many lines absolutely felt like a first pass at the line. Yeah. Like, it's like there has to be a better way to say that. And there was a lot of ones, and again, I don't have specific examples because I wasn't taking notes in the theater, but I remember at least 4 or 5 times in my head coming up on the spot with, like, a better way to say that doesn't feel quite so stilted and, like...
Yeah, and weird and contrived and cringy.
Yeah, and it's like somehow they managed on a lot of these lines to come up with just the worst possible... version of it. Yeah. It seems like, but yeah. Speaking of, we mentioned the Palpatine storyline, but the Palpatine storyline, it's all in this movie, and it's J.J. Abrams claims that's where it was always going, but boy, if that was the case, you could have done anything with it.
Anything. Literally anything.
Literally anything with it in the first 2 movies. So you're a liar. You're either a liar or... you're bad at your job. It's one of the two. It's one of the two. It's literally one of the two. It's either you're lying or you're bad at your job, because if this is where it was always going, we need a little breadcrumb here and there to get us to there.
I just, it completely boggles me. It baffles me that they so obviously did not have a plan for this trilogy. No. Because... say what you will about Disney. Yeah. They're planners. Yeah. We're talking about the people that gave us the 10-year Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. And now they didn't always, not every detail in all of those movies always jived.
Sure.
Like, there's things that changed and blah, blah, blah. But. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's... kind of mind-blowing. And
it's wild.
Yeah, especially when you're getting into Star Wars, because there are definitely things between movies to movies in the Marvel universe that, you know, where certain things changed and certain details just completely got retconned. And it's a little different because in comic books, and because there's so many of the movies that you kind of just forget what got changed and whatnot is part of it. But two, it's comic books. So it's like you're kind of expecting the just like don't worry about that. We're on the new thing, and like but there still wasn't anything as.
But to not even have an end game in mind, is
and that title is
so wild,
super apropos, obviously, and
so irresponsible.
I mean, we saw Thanos in the first Avengers. We saw him so early, before he ever was like in a movie. I think it was the first Avengers, which was 2012, and then his first actual movie was Infinity War in 2018. 2017. 2018. Yeah, 2018. Because wasn't it last summer and this summer? It was like 2018 and then 2019 was Endgame.
Yes,
I think so.
I think.
So yeah, there was like 7 years between when he was introduced and then when he actually showed up as like a character.
So, you know, all of the middle details aren't there, and fair enough. Stories need to be moving things, especially when they have that many parts. But an end game. Come on, guys. A finish line. Yeah. Well,
and especially because it's like, okay, so it's so clearly that like, and with the slights, and we'll get to them here in a second, with the sort of backhanded like dumping on The Last Jedi that this movie does at times. Like there's some very overt ones and some lesser ones, but there's some really overt moments of just dumping on The Last Jedi. It's like, well, if you didn't like it, why didn't you say anything while it was happening? Like, if you didn't want him to kill Snoke or whatever, maybe don't let him kill Snoke.
Yeah.
Or if you don't want him to have Luke toss the lightsaber off the cliff, maybe tell him he can't have Luke toss the lightsaber off the cliff. Like, it's mind-blowing to me that, it's so weird.
This whole thing frustrates me.
Yeah.
It frustrates me that... Look, I don't even have any emotional attachment to Star Wars.
I do.
Full disclosure, full stop. I didn't even see the original trilogy until I was in college. Okay? I have zero attachment to this. I like them.
Yeah.
But I don't have any kind of, like, bond with it. Mm-hmm. Okay? But it pisses me off that they would be such irresponsible storytellers to not have some kind of an ending in sight.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah, I know. And they especially because they amped up so much that this is not only an end of this trilogy, this is an end of the Skywalker saga, of the whole 9 episode thing. And it just feels like you can't end 40 years worth of movies without a plan. Like, you can't do it. You just can't do it. And the fact that you thought you could is a brazenness of the highest degree. What they either should have done 100% is they should have let J.J. Abrams do all 3. Like,
I mean, they probably should have.
And that's what they should have done. J.J. Abrams should have written and directed all 3. Like, say what you will about this one. I thought it wasn't good, and a lot of that's probably on J.J. Abrams. But I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. I think it's a really solid... It's a bit rehashy of Episode 7, but it's a fun movie. It works overall. There's not a ton of really terrible inconsistencies, like plot, weird contrivances and stuff. It overall works. It hits a lot of really satisfying emotional beats. It introduces characters in fun ways. I think it's got really great lightsaber fight in it at the end. So much about that movie I love. It's probably overall, I don't want to say it's my favorite of this trilogy. I think Last Jedi is a better movie. I think if you're going to ask me which one I would like randomly pop in and watch, it would always be The Force Awakens, just because it's like the most digestible, like fun, and you don't have to worry, like everybody liked it, so like you don't have to, I don't have to think about why people hated this movie and stuff, because that just makes me feel bad. Even when I liked it or whatever. But if he had done his story the whole 3 movies, this probably would have been, it probably wouldn't have been as interesting, but it would have been a better
Yeah, it would have been
satisfying
fine.
ending. Probably.
It would have been solid B's all the way through.
Yeah, nothing pushing the envelope, but just like, okay, sure, yeah. C plus B, whatever.
Yeah.
Great job. You did the same thing again. Like whatever, like it's fine. But then they gave it to Rian Johnson, and he's like, nah, curveball, I'm doing my own thing, because he's an interesting guy who writes interesting stories, and he doesn't want to just do this, you know. Yeah. So he writes The Last Jedi, and whatever you like about it or don't like about it, it's different, and it's interesting. When that happened, they should have just let him do the ninth one, because then you continue on whatever he set up, but then you go back to the guy to the first one, which is nothing like the second one. Not nothing like it, but like... It's just
it's insane. It either they didn't have any idea of where they were going, or they didn't tell Rian Johnson where they wanted to go.
That's what's wild.
And then there was like zero oversight on what he was doing from like other writers and storyboarders and a bajillion other people that are involved with making $1 billion action franchise.
That's what feels so shitty about it to me, is that they had him make that movie, and before it came out, they said, I heard Kathleen Kennedy and other people say, this is the best Star Wars movie that's ever been made. I remember interviews of people saying, this is changing, it's amazing, it's so good, it's incredible. And then the movie comes out, and like 25% of people love it, 75% of people, or 50% of people hate it, 25% of people are like, whatever. Well, I don't know what it broke down, but like, I would argue it's probably like half and half between like and dislike, and then there's probably the extremes of like love it and hate it, and it's a very vocal majority that hate, or minority that hate it, but a lot of people didn't like it, or whatever. And they completely just like were like caved and threw Rian Johnson
under the bus you go, Ryan.
Yeah, they're like, and then they have the nerve. Like, I get them trying to course correct and be like, okay, let's get, everybody liked Force Awakens, let's get J.J. Abrams back to wrap this thing up. So like nobody disliked Force Awakens, at least, so like he can do this. But then for the gall of them coming in and like literally taking shots, and we'll just talk. Like, I got one of them here. Like so at one point, Rey in Force Awakens or Rise of Skywalker is on the island, is on the Jedi Island from Last Jedi, and she's like burning Kylo Ren's ship, and she's throwing shit into it, and she goes to chuck Luke's lightsaber into the fire, and Luke's Force Ghost steps out of the fire and catches it and walks out, and that would be one thing, but then he says a Jedi's weapon should be treated with more respect, or something along those lines. So like a very clear,
something shitty,
a very obvious and clear jab at the beginning of The Last Jedi when Luke tosses his lightsaber over his shoulder, which, okay, fine. But like to come in and write that after you let Rian Johnson do what he did in the last movie is the fucking shittiest thing.
It's the gall.
It's fucking wild to me. Again, even if you dislike what Rian Johnson did, imagine a whole studio of people sitting around watching that happen, going, sure, fine. And then when fans don't like it, going, yeah, fuck that guy. Let's, hey, JJ, come make fun of this nerd. Like, what? Like, it's fucking crazy to me.
It's the fucking nerve, the gall of it.
Yeah.
Because Rian Johnson isn't the one that fucked up. If we're gonna call it a fuck up, then the studio fucked up.
Yeah.
You done fucked up, Disney.
Yeah.
Not Rian Johnson.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, you can not like his movie, but his movie only got made because the studio let him make it that way. Like, that's how this works when you're making a movie like this. Like, you can say you didn't like the decisions he made, but those decisions were only allowed to be made because it's like there in Ant-Man. Ant-Man was originally being directed by Edgar Wright. Mm-hmm. Edgar Wright was like, I want to make Ant-Man this way. And everybody knows Edgar Wright's my favorite director. He's like, I want to make Ant-Man this way. And they were like, no, you got to do this, and this. And he goes, okay, I'm done. I'm out. And they got a different director to do that will come in and do what they wanted. And Ant-Man turned out fine. It was not amazing, but it was fine. It would have been way better if Edgar Wright had directed it, I'm sure. But it was fine. But the studio was like, hey, you can't do this. You can't do this. You got to have this. You got to have this. And he was like, I'm walking. if that was what was going to happen in Last Jedi, if they came in and Rian Johnson was like, I want to do this, and they're like, you can't do that, and then he goes, okay, I'm walking, then like,
yeah.
But they didn't do that. They said, okay, yeah, do that. And they're like, good job. We like what you're doing here. Oh, no, we hate what you're doing here. What is... We got to get off this topic.
Get your house in order, Disney.
It's fucking bonkers to me that they would then go and then, yeah, it's the shittiest thing.
All right, yeah, let's get off of that topic.
The Rey Kylo Ben kiss.
Oh, so much cringe.
I hated that. So at the end of the movie, I like that whole scene. That whole scene overall, in general, it felt good to me. I liked. We set up the Force healing. There's a very distinct reason that the Mandalorian episode with the Force healing came out right before this movie, I think. But they set up the Force healing earlier in the movie, and so you kind of knew where it was going, but I liked it. It's the only way this movie could have redeemed Kylo. Everybody's kind of saw the Kylo redemption arc coming, because especially when J.J. Abrams took over, that's what's absolutely going to happen. So I didn't hate it. Whatever, it's fine. But I liked that, they fight together. I like that. I like a lot of the end, like, without thinking too distinctly about the moving parts of it. I like the force teleportation of the lightsaber. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because again, I like it, yeah. And I love them coming together, and I love the shot where they turn together and face Palpatine. But again, I don't like Palpatine. Whatever. There's a lot of it I don't like, but I like elements of it. And I like that scene where Ben dies. I thought it was a well done scene, other than the fact that Rey kisses him. Feels weird. And unearned.
Feels real weird.
And not like it should have been there.
There's a lot of things that I can handle in a movie viewing experience. I can handle secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah.
Fine. It's part of the story. Sure. I cannot handle cringe.
Yeah. I
hate it. It's a horrible sin to me if a movie makes me cringe.
Yeah. Yeah. That scene, that moment, yeah, definitely made me cringe, because the movies before this there's been moments of, even in The Last Jedi, which, we talk about how much they didn't like elements of it and they abandoned a lot of it. Mm-hmm. There were elements of sexual tension in that movie between Rey and Kylo.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was something they told Rian Johnson, that ultimately there's going to be like, we need romantic tension to come in. Because there's a scene where like Kylo's shirtless and Rey's clearly like
flustered.
Yeah, flustered by it and that sort of thing. So it's like, it's not like it came out of nowhere.
Right.
But it definitely wasn't set up in a way that felt like natural to where we get to the end and then they kiss is like, yeah, that makes sense. It didn't make sense. And it just felt to me, that scene, it works so much better and is so much more powerful. If Rey's dead, he saves her, she wakes up, they look at each other, she smiles, he smiles, because it is the first time he's smiled in the entire series, which I think is a really powerful moment. And I like that. But because of a kiss, like, it just feels weird. And like, I know it's like a physical portrayal of love, which is something that Kylo needed to feel or whatever. I don't know. It just he saves her. She's alive. He's happy because of that, because he likes her, and he always has throughout all the movies. He's always felt a connection to her, and we've talked about, I mean, even, before this movie, that's always been the case. So just have him smile because he saved her or whatever, and then he dies. Sure. Fine. But the kid, it's not good, guys. It's not good. They completely dump Rose.
Oh, they sidelined the shit out of Rose.
But they did the worst way. They did it the worst way ever by having her sideline herself.
Yeah.
I feel bad that actress had to agree to do that to be in this movie, probably.
Yeah. Because
they literally go up to her and Finn's like, "Are you sure you don't want to come?" And she's like, "Nope, I'm good here. Not on camera." And they were like, "Great, bye." And I was like, oh my, guys. And this is one of the things that you noted and you mentioned it, but it really did. There's a lot of those kind of things that absolutely felt like this movie caving to just the worst
just the worst sliver of the Star Wars fandom? Yeah, sure smells like it.
Sure smells like it. Like that, yeah, because everybody hated, not everybody, shitheads hated Rose for lots of reasons, namely probably real racist, sexist reasons, in The Last Jedi. And so they're like, oh, well, don't worry, guys. So we'll just kind of like be in the background occasionally in this one. We can't get rid of her completely because like she didn't die in the last one, but like she won't really be in this one. And it's the same thing with, like we talked about with the lightsaber throwing part, and like just anything that anybody didn't like, they were just like, let's take a little, we'll put a little Band-Aid on that on camera because we're cowards.
Yeah.
Because we're fucking cowards. Ugh.
Like, I mean, I guess I can't prove that that's what happened, but
it sure as shit feels like it.
If you're smelling shit, there's shit somewhere around.
Yeah. No, it absolutely. I think it's the case. I think they probably weren't lying when people like execs or whatever were saying before Last Jedi came out that they loved the movie. I think they probably did.
Yeah.
But you know what they love more than movies is money.
Yeah.
And so when everybody came out and said, we hate this movie, you know, when the loud people on the internet came out and said Last Jedi sucks, and like critics loved it, but fans were very torn apart on it, and you know, half the people loved it, half the people hated it. When that happened, they came out and they were like, and they just caved. They caved because
they're cowards.
They're cowards, and they don't like their movies as much as they like money. So they're going to do what they can to try to right that ship, even though it's not a ship that needed to be righted. But
no,
this is a tough thing for them. Obviously, Carrie Fisher died in like the pre-production of this movie.
Yeah.
So and this was very much going to be focused. So their plan was for this movie originally to be focused on Leia. So they had to change a lot. Mm-hmm. And she's still in a lot of this movie as a CG composite, or scenes filmed from 4 previous movies that are like composited into scenes in this movie, and is very apparent.
I was interested in hearing your assessment of the CG compositing, because I don't know a lot about that. I consider myself more like a quote-unquote average moviegoer in regards to like special effects.
Yeah.
Like if they're really bad,
Right.
obviously I'm gonna notice that, but like subtle bad, or if I don't know a lot about the technology, and so I thought it looked okay.
No, it does. It's not the CG. I was just saying that that's what they did. I'm not saying that it looked bad. I think overall it looked fine. The work they did with her, because some of it was supposedly scenes filmed for like Force Awakens or Last Jedi that either weren't used or whatever, where they just basically like composited the actual shot of her into a different shot,
right.
basically, or you know. And then other ones were, to me, looked more like they were kind of an amalgamation of like CG mixed with like dialogue cut up. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the thing is that regardless of how the CG looked, which I thought was fine, I think the dialogue and the scenes she was in felt very obviously piecemealed and shoehorned to get like
it was the dialogue that gave it
together.
away for me, because like some of
it was like talking to a CG phone. Like it was like when you call a phone line and it can only respond with certain generic lines.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, yeah, kind of. Like there were things here and there that were fine, but then there were other moments where like a character would say something to her and her response would only kind of work.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a computer. It's like when you're talking to an AI.
Yeah.
And like, so they were working with what they had and it kind of works, but it's also very noticeable that this was not the performance or the dialogue that she would specifically be giving in this scene. And you can tell.
Yeah.
At least to me, I could, like, it
no,
felt...
you can tell.
And it's not terrible. It wasn't awful, but it was just a little, like, noticeable. Like it's one of those things that kind of takes you out of the movie a little bit. It's not
terrible, and I will say that I did feel like it was at least respectful of her.
Yeah, it was. I thought.
Yeah.
I thought there was a nice moment too where her daughter runs up and says a line to her. It felt, and they linger on it for a minute, and it felt like they were giving that a moment, and that felt nice and respectful and cool. Because I don't think they actually had like a line together. Like it felt like they were specifically like giving her daughter a line, a moment with her. Because I don't think she was in Last Jedi, but I don't know if they ever actually had like a scene. I don't think they may have. I don't remember, but I don't know if they ever had like a scene together. And it felt like this movie was like, we want to give you a scene, you know, which felt cool, and I liked that. But it just felt clumsy. Not clumsy. It just felt like they were working with scraps, and you could tell that they were working with scraps.
A little shoehorned in,
and it was most obvious. Yeah, it was most obvious to me in her death scene, because her death scene, the first time we saw it, I did not understand what was happening.
Yeah,
because she just like Rey and Ben are fighting on the Death Star, and then we just cut to a shot of Leia dropping her headset and walking away from like a computer, and I. We're to understand that she's sensing them fighting, but to me it felt we needed an extra shot of her like face before that, of like as soon as like Kylo shows up and they face off and they start talking, like just a shot of her like looking up, like starting to sense it or something,
like similar to how they had her in Force Awakens when Han Solo dies.
Yeah, and then after they keep fighting, then she drops the headset and walks away. It just felt so abrupt that I was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because she drops the headset like she heard something on the headset that was upsetting. Not like I'm sensing something with the Force. It was just a little like clumsily done. And then she just goes and then she says Ben to Rey, and it works okay, but like the idea is that she used all of her energy just to project her voice to Kylo, and that is what...
That's what starts him on his turnaround.
Yeah, she calls out to him, and he's like, oh, shit. And then him dying and being reborn, literally. Or not dying, but almost basically dying, and then being reborn, blah, blah, blah. But I just thought that whole sequence was so clearly not the way it should have been done, because they were working around the fact that Carrie Fisher wasn't there to shoot.
Yeah.
Like I literally was very confused the first time we saw it, and the second time I was less confused, but still could notice that it just didn't feel right. It just felt like they were missing shots that they needed.
They tried, but it doesn't quite work.
Yeah. So at the end of this movie, we got to talk about this. We'll wrap this up here before too long. We don't have a ton more notes, but at the end of this movie, so the whole Palpatine storyline, he's been raising this giant fleet of Star Destroyers, the Final Order, to go and destroy the whole galaxy so that he can rule over them all or whatever. And we see this fleet at the end of the movie. It's like thousands of Star Destroyers.
Yeah.
As far as the eye can see across the horizon of this planet.
Whole lot of Star Destroyers.
Like within, like all bumper to bumper, the whole sky. Star Destroyers. Thousands of them. And each Star Destroyer is staffed roughly, and Lindsay Ellis tweeted about this, but each Star Destroyer is staffed roughly by like 40,000 people in order to like have it operate or whatever, because it's a giant freaking spaceship. And so at the end of this movie, our heroes destroy all of them.
Everyone. Every
single one of them, literally murdering, I say murdering, it's war, whatever, killing millions, whatever the math is, hundreds of thousands to millions of people.
Which is a problem because we know, as it has been set up in the previous films and in this movie again, we know that what the First Order does is they go out and they kidnap children.
Yeah.
And conscript them into their army.
Yes, because that's what happened to Finn.
Yeah.
That's what happened to Joanna or shit.
I think it's Yana.
Yana in this movie. And they specifically say in this movie, after Kylo comes back from whatever the planet is that Palpatine's on, I can't remember.
Like Exegol or something like that.
Exegol. That's Exegol. When he comes back from Exegol and knows they have this whole fleet, one of the generals or whatever in the First Order says we'll have to amplify our recruiting, or like she says, like we're gonna have to like go steal more kids. Basically, is what she says. Like we're gonna have to go get and script more people to fill out this fleet. Like they specifically mention that in the movie, so we know that these ships have to be staffed by thousands and thousands of people who were literally slaves.
Yeah. And
our heroes just kill them all. Just kill them all.
Which is wild because they had right there, they had a really cool side story.
Yes.
Where Finn and Jana, whatever her name was, I think she only said it like once, go and raise an army of disgruntled, kidnapped stormtroopers.
Because they talk about it early. That's how they bond early in the movie, is they talk about how they were both stormtroopers and how they both, put down their guns and ran away from the First Order or whatever. And it's so easy. All they need to do is, because they give a speech, like Finn and Poe give a speech at the end of the movie to like everybody, have them do that over, and it doesn't even have to be them broadcasting it, but it could be. You can do it however you want, but have them do that speech over like an intercom system, because maybe they're saying it to like, instead of just yelling it to the 30 people that are around in the resistance area, they're like saying it to all of the resistance fighters in the area. Some of them are on spaceships, some of them whatever. Like, so they're doing it over the intercoms to like everybody. And you can do it one of two ways. Either they're also broadcasting it in a way that they hope that maybe some of the people, and I think that's better, is that they broadcast this out and they hope that some of the people on the Star Destroyers will hear this, and they do. And then they start their own revolts within their Star Destroyers. And then, because then imagine the moment of Star Destroyers, like imagine that moment where all of a sudden they're like, we're losing, what are we going to do? And then all of a sudden one of the Star Destroyers turns its cannon and blows up another Star Destroyer, and you're like, holy shit! And then it cuts inside, and it's it's
stormtroopers like ripping their helmets off.
Ripping their helmets off, and what a fucking moment that is! It's mind-blowing that a whole studio worth of people didn't change nothing else about this movie.
Really, I 100% thought we were getting this scene.
Change nothing else about this movie. Like that. What?
They
Why?
Set it up. They remind us of the relevant details that we need to know for that to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? Here's the thing. You've been dumping it on fucking Rian Johnson for this whole movie. Hey, y'all, remember Broom Kid? Remember fucking Broom Kid from the end of The Last Jedi? Everybody memed on fucking Broom Kid. And everybody's like, well, is he going to be a Jedi in this one? Is he going to matter? Is he going to be important? Never going to see that kid again. But what if, just go down this journey with me. That whole thing we just mentioned. What if at the beginning of this movie started, we see Broom Kid, and he gets captured by or maybe not at the beginning. Maybe after they say we need more people to staff these ships or whatever.
We could do a quick montage of them stealing
grabbing
kids.
People. After they say we need more people to man all these ships, blah, blah, blah. They start grabbing these kids, maybe putting them in cages, relevant social commentary. And then and one of the kids they grab is the fucking Broom Kid from The Last Jedi. Broom Kid. And then we get to the end of this movie, and they do the speech, and like we said, they don't know if it's going to work or not, but they do the speech, and they're hoping some people are listening, and we're cut, and blah blah blah. And then we get to the part where one of the Star Destroyers turns its cannon on another Star Destroyer, blows it up, and then we cut inside, and like you said, the stormtroopers are ripping their helmets off, and they rip them off, and one of the kids, or something happens. I don't know how exactly it would work, but they could come up with a way where one of the kids is Broom Kid leading this rebellion, and we see him using the Force because that, he picked up the broom with the Force, and he's using the Force, and it's such a fucking cool moment. It's such a cool moment, and it ties back in a way that feels like you don't hate everything about this movie. Yeah. And just
my mind is still blown that we did not get this scene / storyline, because as soon as they were like, oh, they shut that tower down, we're going to have to go on to the actual ship.
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely, this is where this is going. No. Fuck you, says J.J. Abrams.
No, it's so obvious. It's so obvious. And then, because then you just imagine, like, that moment would blow everybody's mind. It would be like, even if you saw it coming, it would just be like that great moment. And then you get all these Star Destroyers turning on each other, and like Star Destroyers fighting Star. It would be so fucking cool. It would be so cool. And then you get TIE fighters, like they start flying TIE fighters, and it's TIE fighters in formation with X-wings and fucking A-wings. How fucking cool is that? Like, my little Star Wars heart can't take how fucking cool that would be. Like, how fucking cool it would be if, like, all of a sudden these TIE fighters and shit are dogfighting other TIE fighters, and, like, X-Wings are, like, helping. Like, fuck. I would stand and applauding in the goddamn theater. It would have been so cool. It would have been so cool. I'm so mad about it. I will die mad about it. Ugh. Goddamn. All right, a couple of little quick cool things that we liked in spoilers before we wrap this up. I like the moment, and this is probably both of our favorite moments in this movie, maybe. At least up there.
Yeah.
There's a moment at the end after everything's done, and Rey goes back to Tatooine. She's going to bury Luke and Leia's lightsabers together. And she goes back, and she's going into the little homestead, and she grabs a hunk of metal out of the sand, and she slides down into the homestead on it. And as she's sliding, the Rey's theme from Force Awakens plays, and it's the exact same theme and moment as when she was sliding down the sand when we first meet her character. That's such a nice, cute, beautiful little callback.
Best part.
It was one of the best parts of the whole movie. I was like, oh, that's great. I like that a lot. That's great. I also just really like her theme. It's like a great theme. My maybe favorite scene in the whole movie, is the Rey and Kylo Ren fight where he's on I can't remember the name of that planet, the war-torn planet that they go to, and she's on the Star Destroyer in like his room or whatever, and they're dueling in different places, but
and then like stuff is falling into the opposite place. Yeah,
where like they'll hit, like he cuts like a thing of his lightsaber hits like a thing of like berries or something, and then they spill onto the floor in the room she's in, which is like a stark white room. It's like the coolest, like most interesting moment in the movie. That's like a really cool idea that was set up in the earlier movies where they...
Yeah, I thought that was actually a cool like continuation of something that was set up in The Last Jedi, and I wish they would have done more stuff like that. Yeah. Just like rolled with more of it instead of being dicks about it.
Yeah, but I thought that whole fight back and forth was really cool, and then she destroys the stand, and the helmet falls, and he sees it, and he knows where she is. And now you kind of have to look past the idea of like how he didn't already know where she was or what they're seeing in that moment, because she seems to be seeing, well, we're seeing both environments, right? And like, is she only seeing her? It's possible that she's only seeing her environment and he's only seeing his environment.
It's not quite clear.
It's not quite clear, but maybe that's what it is. But we're seeing both.
Yeah,
maybe it feels a little, but it's still really cool. I was like, I could look past that little sort of like confusement of him, but I thought it was really, really cool. I like Poe's old friend, played by, what's her name? The chick from The Americans, I think it is.
I don't know.
It's Carrie something or another. She's a...
Oh, really?
Is it Carrie Russell, maybe? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Carrie Russell. I know she was in it. I'm pretty sure that's her. At least it looked like her eyes to me. But I liked her character design, and I thought her scenes with Poe were really good. And I like Poe a lot in this movie, and I think all this stuff where like that has nothing to do with like the grand storyline in terms of like Rey and whatnot was all pretty good in this movie. Like when we're not worried about like Destiny and like the Palpatines and whatnot, I was like more on board. And I liked her character design, even if it was a little like Daft Punk. She kind of looks like she should be in Daft Punk.
I didn't mind her like character. I didn't like her costume design.
Really?
I thought it was very like dissonant to where they were in a way that was like weird to me and looked weird. Like they were in this like a war-torn ghetto, and there was a very like World War II Gestapo vibe to it. And then like all of a sudden there's the pink Power Ranger. I didn't get it.
I don't disagree. It wasn't dissonant, and it was striking to me at first, and I was like, what the heck? But I just overall thought it was a cool design. It didn't fit in that location. I will agree. But I thought it was a cool character design, and I liked her, and I liked her relationship with Poe, and it added some depth to Poe that I thought was interesting. Yeah. And I thought her armor and stuff was cool looking. Again, if it wasn't basically just a Daft Punk helmet, which it kind of is. But I don't disagree that it was a little dissonant with like the environment, and that may have been on purpose, but I don't know what that purpose would be.
Right. Well, and I think if we had been initially introduced to her in a different environment, I probably wouldn't have had such a visceral reaction to it.
Yeah.
But while we're on the subject of costumes and Poe, I did like that he was out there looking like Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
The movie we deserve.
He needs to be Nathan Drake. No, he needs to be Nathan Drake. Young Nathan Drake. Absolutely. It's a video game character who's basically Indiana Jones. But he very dapper, very handsome. I liked some elements of how it ended, and this is controversial. I think a lot of people didn't like this. I've seen a lot of memes on it, and I don't dislike the memes because I get it. But because I liked the overall message they were going for. I liked the end where Rey goes back to Tatooine, buries the lightsabers. Somebody asks her what her name is, and she says Rey Skywalker. I get it. I get that it's like cheesy as all get out, and I get that it's... I get it. I get everybody's complaints about it. All of that, I understand, and I don't disagree. The meme where somebody tweeted about how somebody asked her, she's Rey, and then she looks into the distance, Rey Star Wars, and then the credits roll. That made me laugh a lot, and I get it. But I also liked the idea of that your parents aren't the people that are most important to you, and who you are and what your name isn't determined by birth and by who gives you that name and that sort of thing, but by what you choose and who matters to you. And that's what they're going for. And I liked that. But I also get it. Why people thought it was dumb.
I'm more on the opposite side of you. I like the message. I think the message is good and positive. The way it played out gave me cringe.
I can't argue. I didn't think it was super cringy. But I can see why some people would.
I think the only way they could have made it more cringy is if they had her break the fourth wall and look into the camera.
Rey Skywalker. Yeah. I don't disagree entirely. I don't know. I like Rey a lot, and I liked her overall journey. Even with the Palpatine thing, I liked her overall journey, and it worked for me. But I get that it's bad. That was all I had, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all the details, all the little spoilery discussion of all the stuff that didn't work for us. And like I said, I didn't hate this movie. I liked it more than I thought I would, but that was very low expectations going in. So
yeah, I feel like it's not saying much.
Nah, it's not saying a whole lot. And obviously, you've heard all of our
you've heard all of our myriad complaints.
I'm so mad now. I can't get over the idea of just the single shot of Poe's X-wing flying into the center of the frame. And then, maybe Snap Wexley, whatever that guy's name is, comes in his A-Wing. And then all of a sudden, 3 TIE fighters come in behind them in, a flying V, like the goddamn Mighty Ducks. And they just fucking wreck shop.
We can't have ideologies mixing, okay?
Can't fucking explain how happy that would have made me. Just how incredible that moment would have been. Oh, I literally might have just applauded out in the theater. I may have. I don't know. I would have loved it so much. But anyways, that's all we got for this. That's our Rise of Skywalker review. Come back next week. We're talking about you follow us on Patreon. Support us on Patreon for $5. You'll hear us talk about The Witcher, which, spoiler free, we liked. I think. Speak for myself. I liked it.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I thought so. But you'll hear why and what we liked and what we didn't in our full review of the first season on Patreon. We're also going to talk about The Mandalorian, which we both hated. I'll leave that teaser there. You have to find out why we hated The Mandalorian on our Patreon feed. And next week, we're previewing our mystery episode, our mystery Disney episode. Not mystery, but voting. Listener's choice mystery episode, which you can go and vote on right now as you're listening to this. Right? Still? Yeah. You can go ahead and vote which one. We're doing either 101 Dalmatians, The Rescuers, or Bambi. Right now, it's pretty much down to The Rescuers or 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, Bambi's not getting a whole lot of love right now.
Bambi is, getting kind of crushed, so probably won't be doing Bambi. But you can still go vote on Facebook and Twitter. Look for us there. And until next week, we reveal which one we're doing. Guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies. And
keep being awesome.